right now.
What's going on, everybody? I hope everyone is having a fantastic Thursday night. We are so close away from our next opponent, Middle Tennessee State. And what better way to get a preview of what to expect come Saturday than bringing in Sam Doughton, Middle Tennessee State writer himself. Sam, welcome to the Scoop. It really is a pleasure. We always love to have like just a perspective from the opponent, what to expect, some familiarity going into a non-conference game or a conference game. It really is a good perspective to bring on the Scoop, and we greatly appreciate your time that you took out of your night.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. That's one of my favorite parts of the job is getting to meet people from all over the country and that love college football and want to talk a little bit about it themselves and, obviously learn a little bit about Middle Tennessee as well. That's one of my favorite things to do every day. And I'm really excited that y'all gave me the opportunity to come on y'all's platform and help y'all out a little bit.
Absolutely, Sam. It's a pleasure to have you on. And let's get to it, Sam. I saw a little bit of Middle Tennessee State's kind of, records against opponents so far.
Mm-hmm.
Start college football. The one that popped out to me was James Madison. I understand they are, in a sense, a very respectable, winnable program. I believe they just transitioned into Division I in the Sun Belt Conference as well. It was, I hate to be rude. It was a beatdown.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it is what it is. I keep it real. What has the season came out to for Middle Tennessee State? Has it been the season you guys expected, or has it been a rocky one to start off?
Well, I think most Blue Raider fans, if you talk to them before the season and told them that they would be 2-1 going into the Miami game, that they would have taken that every single time. They would have felt really good about it. They probably, starting with 2 road games, even though they were both against Group of 5 opponents, that's always just tough to any schedule. Now, of course, most people, if you had told them that we were 2-1, would not have expected that Middle would have lost 44-7 in that first game. And talking to the team and talking to the players, it's very clear that James Madison ran some schemes that they were not expecting, that they hadn't seen on film before. And that caught them a little off guard. Now, that's not necessarily an excuse. You got to prepare for everything that you might see. But they certainly did some things that was different, and that caught the team a little bit off guard. And they've sort of been playing with a chip on their shoulder ever since. I think you really saw it the next week against Colorado State, where they left with a 27-0 lead at halftime, going into the locker room in Fort Collins. That's sort of set the tone for what this team's been these past couple weeks. And I think James Madison might have been a really big wake-up call for this team. They can't really sleepwalk through what they're doing the rest of the year. Now, obviously, Miami presents a great challenge to MTSU this week. There's no question about that. But there's a lot more positive momentum this week than there would have been 2 weeks ago.
What was that Colorado
I really
game?
find this game interesting.
Oh, Go ahead, Paul. We had a delay for a sec. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Sam, I really find this game interesting just because Miami has lost to Texas A&M. It was kind of it was a tough loss because in the eyes of Canes fans, we beat ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Is Middle Tennessee State kind of, you said chip on their shoulder? Do you think they're coming into this game as to you're playing against Miami, you're playing in Miami's backyard at home? Do you think they're going in killer mentality, like, hey, let's get the upset? App State beat Texas A&M. We can play with these guys. How do you think the mentality is in this game?
Oh, I mean, certainly this team all week's been acting like they've got a really good shot in this game. And I think there's a couple, different aspects of Middle's team that is going to provide a challenge to Miami. I think we present a really aggressive defense that's going to maybe make Tyler Van Dyke a little bit uncomfortable. And obviously that's been, a point of weakness the past couple of weeks from what I've read this week, as far as what Canes fans are saying about Miami's offense. And so if they can get to Tyler a little bit in the backfield and maybe the wide receiver depth's not where Miami wants it. This is a team that led the country in takeaways a year ago. And so they've got an aggressive defense. Scott Schaefer used to be the head coach at Syracuse. So I'm sure some Miami fans are at least a little familiar with him from that. He runs a really aggressive multiple front defense that really tries to get after it and tries to turn the ball over. And so anytime you're looking at, a P5, G5 game, often it's turnovers and special teams that ends up making the difference and keeps teams in games. And so I think this team feels like they've got a good shot if they can turn the ball over a couple times. And Middle's also a program that really prides itself on its special teams work, which I know also there were some miscommunications in there for Miami as well. So those couple of things have given them some confidence. I think the main key to this game for Middle is the air raid offense can be able to move the ball against Miami defense that's been pretty lethal through their first 3 games and has shut down pretty much everybody that's come in front of them.
I want to go back here week 2 against Colorado State. They're one of those teams that, while they're not a powerhouse, they do get talent. I mean, they do bring in talent. Oftentimes, it might be guys who don't make grades elsewhere or whatever else. Colorado State. You guys handled them very well. What do you feel was, the game approach that really set the tone and got you guys that win and just rolled them over?
Well, so they're very much a program in transition right now. Steve Adazio, former head coach at Boston College, was like, this past off season, they brought in Jay Norvell from Nevada, and Jay Norvell in the era of the transfer portal brought in 11 guys from that Nevada roster with him. So Colorado State was definitely still trying to implement the system that Norvell wanted to run. And, one interesting element to that game was that their coordinator at Colorado State is Hal Mummy's son. And our offensive coordinator at Middle, Mitch Stewart, is in the Hal Mummy tree, sort of. He's very air raid disciple. His coach at Valdosta State, when he played under Hal Mummy himself. So that the offenses that are run in practice were very similar to one another. And I think that gave Middle's defense all the permission they needed to take advantage of a pretty inexperienced Colorado State offensive line and set the tone early. I mean, they literally got a pick 6 on the first play from scrimmage.
Wow.
So I think that started things off well. And then the offense, which struggled a lot the week before, made some nice adjustments to get the ball moving upfield. And, some different blocking schemes, some different route trees to get guys open in space. And that helped the team out a lot in that situation. Now, obviously, you'd like to see them maybe not take the foot off the gas as much, but, this is a team that's still trying to learn a new system themselves. It's Mitch Stewart's first year here. And so the fact that they're up 27-0, particularly after getting kicked in the teeth the week before, was a really positive sign.
Definitely. You always want to be able to bounce back. There's no doubt about it. You're part of the MTSU reporters, a group of guys, who handle all this stuff. I'm curious, what are you guys saying about Miami? What are you, any concerns, anything you feel you can exploit? What are you guys saying about us?
I think there's a lot interesting about this Miami team. All that Coach Rick Stockstill, who's the head coach here, and the players have talked about all week when I've been talking to him, is the speed that Miami has at all 3 levels on both sides of the ball. I remember Rick saying in his press conference this week, talking about how even the offensive linemen have really good speed for their position and how that can pose a challenge. Now, Middle's a team that likes to dip into Georgia and Florida a lot in recruiting. So there's a lot of speed guys on the roster as well. At least we think have good speed for our level. But anytime you're playing Miami, particularly the way that Mario Cristobal's put this particular roster together, it'll be really interesting, to say the least, whether Middle's going to be able to keep up with that speed. So that's where my major concern is Miami going to be able to out, physical speed, whatever it is, us. But schematically, I think we're feeling pretty good defensively. I think there's a lot of confidence defensively. It's just, is the air raid offense going to be the one that showed up at James Madison, or is it going to be the one that showed up the past 2 weeks and has moved the ball really well?
Sam, what are some strengths of this Middle Tennessee State football team and some weaknesses going into this game?
No, I think the biggest strength I touched on a little bit already is the defensive line. That's a group that's got over 200 games of collegiate experience in the 2 deep right now, between the first and second team. And with that, there's a lot of rotation there. So there's not a lot of people getting tired. There's a lot of hype around Jordan Ferguson, who's a 6-year senior, a captain, getting a little NFL draft buzz just because he's been here so long, led the Conference USA in sacks last year. But he's really taken maybe 60% of the snaps out there just because they have so much depth in that particular room. And they've got a lot of really talented guys that can speed rush, that can power rush, that can, are good run stoppers, and that play their assignments well and let, the guys behind them make plays if that's what the play in particular calls for them to do. Honestly, they're just a really fun group to work with. They had 9 sacks against Colorado State, which tied a program record. So it's a group that I suspect could have some success this weekend. Obviously, Miami's offensive line is going to be probably a little bit bigger and faster than a lot of the ones Middle's faced so far. But I think it's a group that'll, at the very least, hold their own in that respect. On top of that, there's a lot of good depth at wide receiver, which you would expect with an air raid system. That's another group that tries to rotate some people in there. And there's some intriguing, tools there they have. Jalen Lane's a really fast, speedy guy that can play outside or in the slot. He's no more as a returner. He was a preseason All-American at a punt returner. But he's got some good speed skills. He missed that first game at James Madison, and the offense has been a lot better since Jalen came back. And then one of my favorite guys on the team is a guy named Isaiah Gathings, who's a 6'4" wideout that lines up in the slot, which is something you don't see a whole lot at any level. And he's been a really big weapon. He leads the team in receptions right now and has been a big part of it. A long-running theme for Middle since I've been covering them, and even before I've been covering them, has sort of been run production from the running backs. It's not traditionally been great, particularly like the past 3 or 4 years. And the staff and the people around the program think they might have found something in Frank Peasant, who's a Florida guy. He's from Pensacola. Really good power back that does a lot of things right that the coaching staff asked him as far as blitz pickup, being a receiving option as a check down, things like that. But his best talent's definitely turning those 2-yard gains into 5-yard ones by just powering through tackles. So I'm interested to see if Miami's defense is going to be able to get him down early and often, or whether they're going to be able to let him sneak in and turn those 2nd and 8s into 2nd and 6s, which adds up over the course of a game. And then, the secondary at Middle is in a state of transition. Reed Blankenship was a safety who's currently with the Philadelphia Eagles. He left the program this past offseason to go to the draft. Greg Great was another really good safety. He's now with Jackson State at Deion Sanders. He transferred this offseason. And then Quincy Riley was had 5 interceptions last year in just 9 games at outside corner. He's now with Louisville. So lots of turnover in that spot, and there's been some communication issues at times in that group, though they looked really good last week against an admittedly overmatched Tennessee State team. So I'm really curious how, particularly against a wide receiver group that I know has had some injury issues at Miami this year, how they hold up over the course of the game.
You spoke about how the head coach, he's only been around just recently, yeah?
Not quite. This is his 17th season at the helm.
Oh, 17th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Oh, as head coach?
As head coach, that's correct.
Okay,
And,
wow. Okay, so fill us in, because obviously I was just way off there.
mm-hmm.
Fill us in about this staff. Let us know about this current staff at MTSU.
Well, the staff, for the most part, has been together in some form or fashion a really long time. Rick Stockstill's obviously the head coach, and he's been here the longest of anyone. If you flip back, I sometimes flip back through our old media guides we have here in the office behind me. And it's interesting to see how roles have changed over time, per se. We got some coaches that are in, sort of the administration side, that they're helping with logistics and other things that were on field coaches when Coach Stock first got here. But he's kept a lot of the same guys. Tommy West is a former head coach at Clemson. He's the defensive line coach. And, Mike Pauly's been here a long time as the offensive line coach. Scott Schaefer's been the coordinator here ever since he left Syracuse. I believe 2017 was his first season with the program. So it's a staff that's got a lot of continuity. There are a couple pretty new guys. Brent Stockstill, who is Rick Stockstill's son, was a quarterback here, really successful quarterback during Middle's best years when they made the Conference USA Championship game in 2018. He's the quarterback's coach here. And then Shane Tucker, who is another former Middle Tennessee letterman. There's actually 3 former Middle Tennessee lettermen on staff that not only are Middle Tennessee lettermen, but played under Rick Stockstill. So that shows you how long he's been here and sort of the family atmosphere that they try to promote when they're out recruiting, in Tennessee and in the surrounding states, as sort of the type of environment that you're going to come into if you choose to play here.
And that was actually the next question I was going to ask you, was about recruiting. MTSU is in a different kind of a scenario completely than a school like Miami is. And when it comes to recruiting, what's important? What are the values there that you guys try? Is it really hitting it local, or are you guys really trying to expand more and more and more to find more talent outside the region?
Well, I was going to say, I think that the staff tries to play to their strengths, and there's certain areas of the country and of the Southeast that they know really well, particularly the Atlanta, Georgia area, for one, and a decent amount in actually North and Central Florida as well. They'll occasionally dip down in the South Florida area, but if you look at, we have 14 guys from Florida on the roster this year. I think it's 12 now. It was 14 when the media guy was made. I think a couple guys have left the program since then, but there's only 3 that are from Miami area cities and towns, and the rest of them are either from North or Central Florida. But they've got a lot of folks that are familiar with the surrounding states, and then they will try to compete in state in Tennessee for guys that really want to be Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders. Folks in the Murfreesboro area has a couple of really good high schools that are generally state title contenders every single year. That's obviously helpful to have around. They've got some folks that are familiar with the Memphis area of the state, and so they will occasionally go over that way as well as dip down into Mississippi. But mostly they're looking for guys that want a family-type program, a program. Rick Stockstill promotes himself as a player's coach, and he's someone that really, truly cares about his guys. I mean, we got people coming back all the time to this program. And, it helps when you've been here 17 years that you can give a platform for people to come back to, with their kids and their families and sort of see what they help build. And, facilities wise, the university just announced a $66 million football center. That'll be opening in 2024. We're breaking ground on it after the season. So they're looking to up their game in that as well. But they're sort of focusing on where their strengths are in the areas that they know the coach as well. And for a lot of the coaches on staff, it's, the Georgia area, a lot of high school coaches in the Georgia area that they know well. And then, some parts of the mid-state of Tennessee, Memphis, Mississippi, and Florida in particular.
Is Oakland High School one of those schools that you guys go after?
Oh, absolutely. Oakland, I mean, when I'm driving home tonight, I will drive right by Oakland High School. Oakland High School could not be closer to where MTSU is.
All right.
And so they are, Brent Stockstill, somebody that knows the mid-state real well. He is out, at Oakland and Siegel and Riverdale and a bunch of the other public high schools in the area, some up in Metro Nashville as well. Every single Friday night that they're in town, I hear about him going off somewhere in particular. And, they try to get in as Oakland as much as they can. Obviously, Oakland's going to have some guys that might have some bigger offers than Middle at times, and that can become difficult to compete with, admittedly. But Middle does try their best, and it does help. And particularly in this stage with the transfer portal, Middle's open to a lot more kids that maybe wouldn't consider them initially when they're perhaps coming back into town.
Hey, Sam, going into this matchup, I believe Miami's favored by 23 last time I checked. What's it going to take for Middle Tennessee State to potentially, pull off the upset against Miami playing at home, you think?
Like I said, a little bit earlier, it's probably going to be requiring Middle to get a few turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, a few takeaways to slow down some of the offensive momentum. And then it's going to require the offense to be able to execute on those short fields. One critique of the air raid, anytime anyone talks about it, is that it's sometimes not the best in short yardage situations. And so in the event that they don't have, 80 yards to go, it might be, get a little tight around there. And they need to make sure they're finishing drives when they get those short fields with touchdowns, not field goals, in order to have a shot here, really. But I think the Middle defense has a good shot at keeping this game a little closer than maybe most Miami fans would like most of the way. Obviously, things can change when you go out there and you get hit in the mouth on the first drive. You never know. But we played Southern Miss last year and handled them pretty easily at our place. And Southern Miss obviously kept things pretty competitive for Miami until about, late second, early third quarter. So I think that's given, Middle, at least internally, a little confidence that they can do the same and just give themselves a shot late.
Is there anywhere that you see on the field on Miami's end that you think it's a complete mismatch for Middle Tennessee State that, should be an advantage towards Miami?
I think Miami's defensive speed has a lot of people really concerned, particularly in the back seven. So sort of the linebacker in the secondary. I think that they've done a really good job of keeping plays in front of them early on and being able to not give up a lot of yak, not give up a lot of easy plays. And sometimes that's what the air raid's looking for, right? Finding some space and then making one guy miss and go forward. And so if Miami can prevent that, there's a chance that things might not go smoothly for Middle throughout the entire game. And another concern, also on the offensive side, is the offensive line at Middle is shuffling through some guys. There have been some guys that missed last game with some injuries. They've been back practicing this week, but you just never know how that's going to go game time decision-wise with them. So, those guys that played last week did really well against an FCS team that was probably a little overmatched. But it's a young offensive line in general. They only returned one starter from a season ago. And so that's always a constant concern at this stage of the season is how are they gelling together and have they built up enough depth at this point to feel confident every time they step out on the field.
I want to get to some specific players here just to kind of get your take on them. Defensive end Jordan Ferguson. Obviously, this guy is a name that Canes fans need to be aware of. Give us a little breakdown on what he does.
I mean, Ferguson, the classic high motor defensive end. He's the type of guy that's got relentless effort every single time he's out there on the field. And then as far as his skill set, he's one of those guys that's not really a power or a speed rusher. He can really do both. He's got a really good interior strength and just has a knack for playing in his gaps correctly and sealing off whatever side of the field he's on from whatever actions going forward. He's really good at, if the pocket's starting to collapse, he's usually the first one to recognize that and attack the quarterback in those situations. That's often how I see him get a lot of his sack numbers up. But I think his TFLs might be more impressive as far as closing down the run game on that edge when he's on the field. One other thing to note about Ferg is that he's just a really tremendous person. He started a nonprofit during the last year that called Hands Worldwide that has helped him set up opportunities to feed the homeless in his hometown in Atlanta, Georgia, do blanket drives here in Nashville, which is just 40 minutes north of where Murfreesboro is. And so he's got really cares about the local community. He was named to the AFCA Good Hands team this past week, which I know a lot of people in the program are really excited about. So that's what I think of first when I think of Ferg. I don't really think of him as much as a player these days as I've gotten to know him. But he's a tremendous force on the field, and it's kind of fun to think of the contrast between the two, the on the field and the off the field persona.
Sounds like a high IQ defensive end who understands his assignments and containments and all that kind of stuff.
Really smart player, no question.
The next player I want to bring up to you, and a very interesting story. I got a chance to look into it a little more, but I'd like you to definitely dive into it a little more, is your quarterback, Chase Cunningham, a former walk-on. Talk to us about just how this walk-on earned his role.
Yeah, Chase has certainly had the most interesting journey of maybe, any FBS quarterback, certainly any of the ones in Conference USA that I cover on a regular basis on how he got to that job. He's a 6-year senior, just like Jordan Ferguson is. So he's been in the program a long time, like to the point where he was in Brent Stockstill's wedding when he got married a couple of years ago. But he's a guy that came from Knoxville Catholic, which is a pretty good private school in Tennessee. And the program brought him in because they liked his skill set. But obviously, you look at his measurables, he's a little undersized. I think we list him at 5'11". That might be a little generous. I think Chase would be okay with me saying that. But he's got a tremendously accurate arm that's endeared him to coaching staffs throughout. I mean, he was, backup under Tony Franklin. He was the first backup under Brent Dearman, and now he's the starter under Mitch Stewart after starting several games last year. Bailey Hockman was a transfer from NC State who started at quarterback initially for Middle when my first year covering them last season. And then, against UTSA, I think Bailey was not having a great game against the Road Runners, and Chase came in the second half and played a lot better. And Bailey came back the next day on Sunday when the team got back from San Antonio and told Coach Stockstill that he was done with football and needed to focus on his family at that point. And so at that point, Chase took over the job and had an incredibly productive year the year before. I think 16 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, threw for 360 yards in his first start on the road in Charlotte. and his teammates love his leadership and love how much he carries himself and the way that he leads them. And, when you're at his size, you got to be smart with your decisions and pick your spots. And he's improved his deep ball for sure since I've started watching him. His mobility is a little down because of the knee injury that cut his season short last year, I would say, which was definitely maybe one of the hardest parts of his story, is that he finally reached the top of where he wanted to be in college football, and then tore his ACL and had to build himself back up from that. But he's clearly got a good grasp of what the offense wants to do, and that's helped him be successful. But I think the phrase I used to know is, if you ever saw Steve Young play back in the day, it's a very similar style for Chase, where he's a little bit shorter quarterback that's really good on those short to mid-range passes, quick passes in particular, the West Coast air raid style. And then, he's got some mobility to roll out and run the read option a little bit as well. Definitely not a running quarterback, but one that you're not afraid to let him run if the situation arises.
Well, Ross, you got anything else for our outstanding guest, Sam, for tonight before we get into predictions? Think you're on mute, Ross, but maybe that was it.
Yes, sir. You got it right. My bad. There's actually one player that I'm very curious about, and he's a player that you brought up earlier, and it's your 6'4" slot receiver, Isaiah Gathings. What allows him at 6'4" to be so productive in the slot?
I think he's just got a really good sense of finding space amid the linebackers and safeties that he's attacking. He's got a good understanding of where he needs to adjust his routes every single time on a play call to find that spot. Now, and also, it helps a lot of the play calls are designed for him. A lot of those situations is often the way, the air raid works. It's a 1 or 2 read to one side of the field in particular, at least on the initial snap. And so when he's a big target, he's able to find some space there and just be a secure, blanket, the way that a tight end often works in maybe a more traditional offense. Is the best comparison I have for him. Middle of the year before, when we were running out of more 11 personnel, had sort of a wide receiver line up as a tight end that had a similar build to Isaiah. Jimmy Marshall, I think, was 6'5" and 240 or something like that. So he got to learn under Jimmy for a bit, and this year has really been a big breakout year for him, where he's been a big possession threat that can keep drives alive. And either to start on a first down and get some manageable situations, or get a big catch to get a first down on third down or something like that as well.
Well, yeah, that's it for me there, Paul.
All right. Well, the Miami Hurricanes are facing Middle Tennessee State at 3:30 p.m. come Saturday. Believe it or not, they're 0-2 against Middle Tennessee State all time. I have no idea when they last played.
They played in 1931 and 1932.
All right.
All right.
Let me look up. I had the games pulled up at one point. I know for a fact Miami has not scored a point against Middle.
Oh my gosh!
In their entire history.
What?
I want to get the exact scores for you guys, because we do have it somewhere in our book down here.
That's hilarious.
But it was, I was a little shocked to see this when I was flipping through this week. All right, here it is.
Back in the day when those games, were 7 to 9.
Yeah. So in 1931, here in Murfreesboro, Middle Tennessee won 20-0. And then the next year, Middle Tennessee got on the train that time in 1932 and won 7-0 at Miami. So totally different era of football, but I thought it was pretty wild. The two teams had played before at all, to be honest with you. Because Middle was a school that was a Division I AA school for most of its football history. Middle moved up in 1999 was when they started their transition up to then the 1A, now the FBS level.
We will definitely celebrate our first score then.
Absolutely, y'all should take pride in it.
So Sam, looking at the spread, what do you think? You think Miami covers the spread? I mean, what do you think happens this game?
I felt better about Middle covering the spread when it was at 26.5, which is what I think it opened up at. Now it's down to 23. That's getting much closer to where I think the score might end up, unless Middle has that sort of success that you see on the defensive side that I've been talking about. If Middle can turn Tyler Van Dyke over a couple of times, get a lucky fumble bounce here or there, and maybe make something happen on special teams, obviously I think the game's going to be pretty close. But if we're just playing straight up and both teams take care of the ball, I think Middle's got enough defensive firepower to keep things pretty interesting for most of the game. But Miami might have a little bit too much speed all over the field for Middle to sustain that throughout the game. So 23 is very close, but I'd lean towards the Middle cover, but I'm less certain on it than I was earlier this week when the line was a little bit bigger.
Ross?
I got just a raw score for us. My raw score prediction is the Canes pull off the victory 30-13. I believe that there will be some of those defensive struggles early on. I think MTSU has the pieces, or especially early on, to give us a little bit of problems there. But once second half comes around and we get the game script figured out and start to get the defense figured out a little more, I think that's when we start pulling away a little bit. But 30-13 is not exactly a blowout score. So, yeah, I expect the game to be a little bit closer than some fans do.
That's pretty similar to the way the Southern Miss game went when I was, scoreboard watching that week as well. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment, particularly from a Miami perspective. Obviously, I'm a little biased working for the university itself, but that's sort of the lens I come from. But I think it will be competitive for longer than most people think. And so, all the couch surfers that happen to flip the ACC network looking for something to watch might be a little more intrigued by this game than some folks are thinking out in the streets.
Yeah, MTSU has got some talent. There's no doubt about it, and you guys keep adding talent too. It's pretty amazing actually that you guys are finding the talent you're finding. You guys are putting guys in the NFL. Surprisingly, guys like Richie James and stuff. Came through your program. So, multiple current NFL players, I think, actually from your school right now.
Thank you so much for giving me a quick plug here. But we're retiring Kevin Byard's jersey. Against UTSA next week on Friday night.
Okay.
Obviously all pro safety for the Titans,
yep.
and that's kept him, close to the program ever since he's been with the Titans his whole career. So certainly, I've had a lot of success at the NFL level of late, and that's always great to see. And I just want to thank y'all for having me on tonight and sharing a little bit about Middle's program. Hope to help y'all's viewers learn a little bit about us and some names to look out for when they tune in this weekend, or hopefully watching Hard Rock Stadium for those that are able to attend.
Absolutely, man. I know we're excited about this game just for the simple fact that getting a chance to talk to you, it really opens the door, opens my mind to the other possibilities and stuff like that. And you giving me that list of players and stuff to look over, and I went and watched their film and stuff like that. There's a legit reason you gave me those, because these guys can play ball. I mean, flat out, these guys can play ball, and it's not just playing against weaklings. These guys can play against legit talent. I have no doubt about that. So, Sam, Dan, just thank you for giving us this time. Dude, it was great. It was truly great to get a MTSU guy in here and just to help us understand a little bit more about a program that we're just not that familiar with.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and hope that when we're not playing the rest of the year, that you'll give us a fair shake when we start Conference USA play, and because everyone that we have will make all of us look better at the end of the day, is the way I look at it when we're facing other opponents. So appreciate you guys having me on, and look forward to the game this Saturday.
Yep. We're looking forward. We'll talk after the game, Sam.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good night.
You too.